So, who do you think you are? That's quite a provocative question.
Yes, it is. It is a provocative question. So let's begin by saying that we're born. We're born into a family, or we're looked after by a caregiver, and we get conditioned through the years, depending on what kind of family background you have. And so you come to a stage in your life and you're suddenly expected to leave home, know who you are, know what you want to do, know what your dreams are and your aims in life. And around that time, which is a difficult time, you're possibly thinking about your choices, your sexual orientation. You might fall madly in love with somebody and feel very attracted, not quite understand what's going on, physically, emotionally, sexually, and all sorts of things. And so the next stage is you find yourself in a relationship. And this relationship, you fall madly, head over heels with somebody. They're very attracted to you if you're lucky. And so you start having the most fantastic time. Everything's perfect. You agree it's fantastic that he likes what you like and you like the same place, and isn't it extraordinary that you've been on the same holiday together?
Are we talking particularly about younger people, or can this scenario apply to older people as well?
I think the act, or the expression of falling in love can happen at any stage in your life. You never forget it, you always remember it, and some people, go back and use it as their whole core of their life, in that respect. But anyway, you find yourself in this situation and everything runs perfectly for quite a good time, possibly up to 2.5 years or a bit further on, and you mostly agree, everything's fantastic, and then suddenly this wretched word separation starts happening again. And in order to live a realistic life, in order to answer to the ego, to how you're going to find your food, go to work, raise a family, and possibly the children come around about this time, which makes things even more complicated, suddenly you find that your partner is disagreeing with you. Why don't you phone my mother? She fed me well enough, if you want to talk about breastfeeding, or that kind of thing.
So when you use the word separation, you're actually, you're not talking about physically separating from each other. You're talking about feeling kind of isolated from your partner, or because you think things differently to the way they do.
Yes, before you fell in love, you were this separate person, you were this single person, and suddenly you're coupled up, and you're needing, hopefully, to be able to understand, and you haven't got the tools, in knowing quite who you are. So in this situation, where you're struggling to understand the other person, what happens is that the two things happen. Possibly you feel that you're incompatible, and if it's an early relationship, you leave because you feel you just haven't got anything in common anymore, you're falling out.
That's presumably, after quite a build-up of time of things not going, brilliantly.
Yeah, so great expectations. You think this is the perfect person.
Can you give some examples of the kind of thing that might have, come between you, that might have caused this friction?
Well, one of the things that causes a lot of problems in relationships, and I'm not going to go into it too much here, is different cultures, different value systems, the kind of parenting that you've experienced. That at a young age, it's slightly different if you're more mature, but at a young age you don't quite understand. And the point I want to really get across today is this is the time, if you have any inklings, to look into yourself, to try to find out whether some of the things that you're being accused of, or some of the things that are going wrong in your relationship, are more to do with the fact that you don't know who you are.
you talked about culture, but presumably you mean that in quite a wide sense. You're
Very,
not
very
talking
wide.
in terms of nationalities. You're
No.
talking in terms of the way you were brought up, where you were brought up, how your parents behaved.
No, both.
Oh, okay.
Both, absolutely both. Culture in the big picture, and value systems in the small picture. But it's an opportunity for you to go into yourself, to try to understand why you take everything so personally, why you feel that you take offence when you're criticised if your girlfriend or boyfriend is trying to help you understand something about yourself, and you say, whoa, we go back to the pride I talked about. There are several areas that would be helpful for you to maybe just look into yourself a little bit more. There's plenty of self-help reading out there, but if you find you're disagreeing over domestic things which are very sometimes quite challenging, particularly if your wife was brought up in this particular way and she always has a Sunday meal or whatever it is, but you'll find that there'll be difficult situations whereby you find yourself being very unhappy over certain issues, and you feel that you can't bring them up because you just feel that it's your fault, because in many respects your partner has inferred in the past it is your fault, and so you shut up about it instead of explaining yourself. And to give a good example, one of you both have busy jobs, but one of you insists for 2 or 3 days a week on the way home from work, which is late anyway, that they stop off for a couple of hours at the gym. And 2 of those particular days are days where you actually finish work early. You find yourself preparing the meal and you don't mind doing that, but you would actually like to spend time with the other person. And you find it difficult because she or he works very hard, to jump in and say, look, we need to talk about this. And one of the things that is helpful in this scenario is for you, if you're deciding to do something which is proactive in the relationship, is to take the person aside on occasion and just say, listen, look, I've got a problem. I really miss you in the evening. I know it's very important to you, but I really miss you, and I think it's damaging our relationship. Then we could spend time together, and we're not. And when it's coming from you, and you're putting yourself in the position of having the problem, it's always more open for the other person, and you become more available to them.
So in a way, we're talking about the same kind of energy that you mentioned in the last conversation, where about being right and being happy.
Yes.
Where sometimes somebody has to admit that they're wrong. They have to step up
Yes.
and go the extra mile.
Yes.
And put it across as it being their
Yes.
mistake. So
Yes.
it's kind of the same energy, isn't it?
It is
really?
kind of the same energy, but there is a difference if you go further down the line and you find that you try to be the one who initiates these situations on a regular basis, and you feel that you're putting in more of the pennyworth than the other person is responding. And we've had discussions like this before.
Yeah, so we haven't actually come up with a suitable
I
answer.
think
How
that,
do you deal with that?
Well, I do really feel that if you have tried very hard and you've put your whole heart and soul into it over many months or possibly years, and you come to the same conclusion, but that the other person just doesn't want to go along with in anything you agree with, then I think it's telling you something. But what I'm trying to help you see is that there are ways of trying to assess the kind of things that you might be that might be upsetting your partner, and going in and admitting them more readily and not taking things as personally. So in that respect, it is going back to the are you right or happy, but it's in the practical way of how it actually happens in a relationship.
So it's about basically trying to rectify things before they get beyond repair, and
Yes, I think I haven't spoken enough about the kinds of things that are difficult to look at in your personality, You know, why you're envious, why you're jealous of certain people, why you're jealous of your co-worker, why you feel your boss always prefers him, and you come home and you're a bit disgruntled with your partner for reasons that you don't explain, and so it goes on. It's in this kind of area that there is plenty of evidence, particularly these days, whereby you are encouraged to look into your own personality, to learn to love yourself before you love another.
Right. So could you maybe summarise the whole thing about who do you think you are and how it affects your relationship, what you can actually do about it in the short term anyway, to
yeah,
make
I
things
think
better?
to be very aware and open when you are leaving home, or when you're just about to go into a new relationship. Be very open with the person, and understand that you're coming at this relationship from very separate, you could call it attitudes, value systems, and be aware that this is a reality. It's not rocket science. That, you know, there are things that you will disagree with, but it's at the change where the falling in love perhaps falls away a little bit. You have more social responsibilities in life. You buy a house, you know, you've got to decide about a practical issue in your life, and you suddenly find that your partner thinks something completely different.
Would you say that? I mean, we've talked about this quite from the perspective of younger people who meet for the first time and have their, you know, relationships when they're young. Presumably, with older people, possibly even second marriages and things like that, it might be even more difficult because people are really entrenched in their ways.
And that's very true. I think it is very difficult. And I think that with second marriages and people who are older in age, it's very important to respect that space. But you still come together, you just have more knowledge and you have more maturity, you have things that you respect, and you question, and you sometimes perhaps beg to disagree, you know.
And that's okay.
And that's fine.
Yeah.
It's fine to be not fine.
Yes, of course. Okay.
In that respect.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's as good as answer in any relationship, whether young or old. You know, discussion, you know, differences in opinions are good. Not arguing, not sharing opinions becomes unhealthy in the end. And that is quite destructive in a relationship. It's good to talk.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's a good note perhaps to finish this one on, and we'll look forward to talking again.
Yes, that's great. Thank you.